All right, well, it's just about 4 o'clock. Hey, Rose, if everybody wants to introduce themselves.
Sure. Sarah, I'll just go ahead and kind of launch the program, and then we'll do that, if that's all right.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Well, hello, FATA members. We've missed you. It's almost Thanksgiving, so we hope you're getting ready. And we thought that this topic of cottage foods would be perfect right before the holidays. And with us today, we have Steve Carmody, who is the Environmental Administrator for the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services Division of Food Safety. That's quite a title there, Steve. In his role, he oversees the division's recall, foodborne illnesses, state sampling, and hemp food programs for Florida. Steve has had already an illustrious career in a short time, working for Darden in the Orlando, Central Florida area as a food safety auditor. And he also was with the Department of Business and Professional Regulation, where he had many roles, including sanitation and safety inspector and a senior training inspector. He's been with the Department of Agriculture since 2017, and he is currently pursuing a master's in public administration and emergency management from UCF. So welcome, Steve. We're really glad to have you here today, and we consider you an expert on cottage foods, and we thought that you would be able to share a lot of good information with our members.
Well, thank you. It's very happy to be here. Yeah, I've played a lot of roles in regulatory in the food world anyway over the past coming up on a decade. So yeah, look forward to the presentation. Hopefully everybody gets something out of it. And if there's anything question-wise that you have while going through it, throw it in the chat box, and I'll be happy to take a stab at it and get an answer for you.
Great. Well, let Lisa, our founder, introduce herself, and Sarah, and then we'll pass it off to you, Steve.
Yes, thanks, Steve, and go Knights. I'm also a graduate of the UCF MPA program, so welcome to the team. So yeah, this has been an interesting topic to see cottage foods kind of evolve. Steve can tell you better, but it's been several years ago since the first bill, maybe 7-8 years ago since the first bill passed. And it actually had a pretty low threshold when it began, of about $15,000, and we've seen that go up. I think that's going to be one of the big things that he talks about. It's a great opportunity, but there's some very specific requirements around it. So I'm excited to hear what the department's doing with this, and hope you guys will learn a lot today.
Hi, just briefly, I'm Sarah Harris. I'm one of the directors for FATA. And if you call or email, you probably get me, and hopefully I'm able to answer your questions. If not, that's why we bring people like Steve on to help. So Steve, I'll go ahead and launch the presentation if you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay.
All right. Just to prevent my screen from glitching, I'm going to shut my camera off just for the sake of going through the PowerPoint. Then I'll throw it back on here at the end so you know I'm still around. So the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, we cover quite a wide variety of different fields. I'm in the realm of food safety, so that's what I'm going to touch on today. Next program. So the objectives of this PowerPoint and this call, we're going to do an overview of the Division of Food Safety, so you kind of know a little bit more of what is entailed in what we all do. We're going to define what a cottage food operation is, discuss the differences in the allowances and restrictions for cottage food operations in the state of Florida, and we're going to review proper labeling of cottage food products, and then finally wrap up with all of the changes and really the main changes from the 2021 Florida legislative season. All right, so quick start, introduction of the division within our department and what we do. Our mission statement is to ensure a safe and wholesome food supply and also support Florida's food industries. So if we pick that apart a little bit, yes, the Department of Agriculture is regulatory, so there are components to that. But by and large, we're also here to support our industries that we do regulate to see them thrive. So, in terms of inspections, who are we, right? So, the Division of Food Safety within FDACS, it consists of two programs. We have our retail food program and our manufacturing food program. Together, we cover approximately, at least as of last year, 47,000 food entities, and that encompasses about 115 inspectors statewide. So, who do we permit? We permit everything from your supermarket and grocery stores, convenience shops, baked goods, meat markets, anything that essentially is going to be sold for consumption to a consumer with the intention of it not being consumed on premise. Some examples, again, continuing on with that, novelty ice cream trucks. So remember the ones that's a kid driving around the neighborhood. Those specifically do fall to us, cotton candy, pretzels, some of your more lower risk items in terms of mobile units. On the manufactured food side, we have everything from your bottled water plant, so think Zephyr Hills, that's a local plant here in Florida, food warehouses, distribution facilities, and then major manufacturers or processors. So if you, a good example I always like to give, if you enjoy Olive Garden salad dressing, that is produced here in the state of Florida. So again, they have a wide reach of who they sell to, which goes nationwide, if not international. So if it's produced in the state and sold across state lines, we're going to issue a permit and regulate you as well. So what foods do not require a permit? There are some within our statute, which is Chapter 500, that are actually exempt from requiring a permit as a whole. Everything from your boiled peanuts, as you see in the picture, honey processors, whole produce, whole uncut produce, or live blue crabs. So yes, while all these are considered food in some capacity, they are exempt statutorily from having to be permitted with our agency. So moving to the bread and butter of it, cottage food operations. They are also exempt from receiving a permit. So up on here is the exact definition, quote unquote, right out of statute. And I think it's important that we do take a little bit of time to depict kind of what goes in, what comes out of this definition. So a natural person or an entity that produces or packages cottage food products. So just that section there alone, a natural person just means someone that has interest or ownership or stakes within that cottage food operation. And then not everybody likes to have their name on the nomenclature to have ownership of that, so you can still operate this as a quote-unquote entity. So it's really important that everybody realizes that there are those two aspects in this to be qualified as that cottage food operation. The other component in here is very important, so it's at the residence of that person or persons, again, who have ownership interest in that entity, that cottage food operation. All right, so now that we've kind of defined what a cottage food operation is as a whole, we can go a little bit more of where can I make the product? So I decided I want to start doing this. I'm going in there. Where do I need to set up my processing location? So all foods that are made or produced by a cottage food operation must be done at the residence. That's a key word there, the residence of the natural person who has ownership interest in the entity. So what does that mean? So if I'm a sole owner in a cottage food business, those products, no matter what it is I'm making, have to be made within my residence. If there are a secondary individual that's going to join in on my cottage food operation, because both of us have that ownership interest in the entity, we can actually use either one of our residences to produce the product. So it's very important that it's not just setting up at your relative's house necessarily, but it's whoever's going to have that ownership interest in the operation itself. That is where the product has to be produced. So motorhomes, rented kitchens, shared kitchen, outhouses, farms you may have, farmhouse you may have in the back of your residence, all of those are not going to be acceptable to produce a product. It has to be at your place of residence. So very, very important. So now that we've kind of figured out where to make the food, what food can I make? So some of the examples of cottage foods that we do allow and we don't allow, again, these are not all-inclusive lists. However, it's a pretty good snapshot of what's pretty commonplace that us as an agency, Department of Agriculture, do see out there. Really, in a nutshell, things that do not require time or temperature control for food safety, those are going to be the items that are going to be permissible to be conducted under a cottage food operation. And those are going to be things like your baked goods, pastas, vinegars, honeys, etc. Foods that do require that time, temperature control, or maybe have a component that is considered a specialized process, those are what's going to be restricted from a cottage food operation. So again, you have a list here on the right-hand side of your screen. You can see your salsas, your barbecues, your ketchups, mustards, basically your sauces, any animal products, dairy products. Those are going to be really some of the main things that we see that we have discussions on that we want to make sure are not taking place in a cottage food setting and are going to have to be made in a setting which is regulated by our agency. All right, if you were lucky enough to join the call before it started here, you heard us talking about hemp brownies. Lo and behold, we have a slide for it. So especially after Florida passed their hemp law, Chapter 581, 2 years ago, hemp products, marijuana products within hemp food, or excuse me, within food products become more and more prevalent. So it's really important to note that no hemp extract food products are allowed to be made under a cottage food operation. Anything involving the marijuana plant has to be regulated in some capacity. Alrighty, so now that we have a basis for what we can produce, let's talk about how we can get your product ready for sale. So cottage food law requires specific labeling for each and every product that's made under cottage food law. So a cottage food operation may sell only products that are prepackaged and has a correct label affixed on each one of those products. So you can't just have it on a sign next to the product. The label actually does have to be on each individual package. And that can come in many forms, whether it be a sticker, a hang tag that hangs off the side of the package, or what have you. But all that applicable information does have to make that label in order to be valid for sale. So let's break it down and talk about everything that needs to go on there. If you follow along with me, I'm going to go down the list here, and you can see the reference on the right-hand side of this mock label. So first and foremost, name and address of the cottage food operation. That way, if there is any indication or anything happens to the product or the consumer, we're able to trace it back to where that product was made from. We need the name of the product. What are we selling? Okay. Net weight or net volume, depending on the product, of each package. So if you see down at the bottom in this example, we have a net weight of 3 ounces for this single cookie. Allergen information: wheat, eggs, milk, soy, tree nuts, peanuts, just depending on what's in your product. So very important that you know the ingredients that are going into your product. And then finally, there is a mandatory statement on here that your product is made in a cottage food operation that is not subject to Florida's food safety regulations. So very specific text, and yes, it does have to meet every one of your labels that goes on your product. And then, of course, if you make any nutritional claims about your product, that would have to follow federal guidelines and make your label as well. So very important that if you're going to say that it has some type of nutritional claim, that does make your label. All right, so now that you have your packaged product ready to go, time to discuss how to sell it. So cottage food operations may sell their pre-packaged product directly to consumers only. This can be done in a few different forms. Some examples: internet sales, direct delivery, private events, and then farmers markets as well, or flea markets. For private events, all products must be made at the operator's residence, right? So if you're the owner, the operator of that cottage food operation, again, has to be made at your residence and then delivered directly to that customer's event. There cannot be any cooking or preparation done at the event. So what you would be delivering for that is going to be your completed, packaged, labeled product. And then lastly, cottage food operations may not sell their product at wholesale. So that means you can't sell to another business to then again be sold, and then you also cannot sell it via consignment. Right. All right, so I'll take a quick break here, and Sarah, pitch it back to you to see if we had any questions come in before I get into my next section.
Yes, we do. We'll start with Susie was wondering if you have a facility that's separate from your residence, but it's connected by a breezeway, so it's very close, so that you consider it part of a residence. Would that count?
It would not. So when we say residence, it has to be that main section of the house. What is the residential kitchen within it? And that's what I'm saying. If you have an outhouse, I know some folks have a farm in the backyard, farmhouse kind of thing.
Like a guest house.
Exactly.
What about a guest house that has a kitchen?
Yeah. So it has to be the primary residence. That's where that product has to be made.
Okay. And you said whole produce. So you can't like slice up an apple for samples?
Correct. Correct.
Peel an orange. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone's making kettle corn on site, does that require a mobile food permit?
It would. Yep. So if you wanted to make kettle corn under cottage food, you'd have to pop it at home, bag it, label it, and then you could sell it. Under cottage food, you cannot do any of that processing, in this case, popping up the popcorn outside of the residence. Okay.
And specialty food trucks and carts that sell a single product are regulated by the Department of Agriculture, and full service food trucks are regulated by DBPR. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, great. And why is vinegar okay to sell cottage food, but not pickles?
Good question. So the vinegar, generally what we see with the vinegar is it's bought already considered and labeled as vinegar, and then maybe somebody's adding flavors to it or seasonings or something along those lines. Pickling, you're actually taking a product, cucumber, adding ingredients to it, cooking it, and letting that acidify, therefore becoming the pickle. So there's an acidification process that the department considers to be a specialized process, and quite honestly, if done wrong, it can kill people. So that's why that has to be a regulated process. Okay.
And I believe Katie was asking if this is a new rule. Did not think cottage foods could be sold online, and can honey be sold online?
So previously, correct, cottage foods were not able to sell their product via internet sales. That is one of the changes, and I'll be discussing that here shortly as well. That was enacted by the 2021 legislation.
Okay. And are interstate sales allowed?
So you won't be able to set up across interstate line. So you can't go to Georgia to a farmer's market there, set up and sell your Florida product. Because again, you're talking interstate commerce there. However, if you're advertising online and I live in Georgia and I want to buy your product, you can ship it to me. It's a fine line, okay. But you can't physically take your product and sell it at the market across state lines. But you can do that internet transaction.
Okay.
Good question.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, very interesting. When it comes to pickles, eggs, and honey, does it need to be approved by either the Department of Agriculture or Health Department, or are they exempt by cottage law? You've already answered the pickles. What about eggs and honey?
So eggs, eggs are not considered cottage food. There are some specifics in statute that eggs pertain to. We do have a limited poultry and egg. So like if you're if you farm chickens, you grow chickens and they hatch eggs and you want to sell those eggs, you do have to have a permit with us. I believe we would permit you up until 15,000 eggs, I believe, off the top of my head. Anything outside of that requires a permit from the USDA. And then you said honey was the other one?
Honey. Mm-hmm.
So as long as you are harvesting that honey yourself, bottling it yourself, labeling it yourself, you can do that under Cottage.
Okay, wonderful. If you have a farm stand on your farm, can you sell products direct to consumer if they follow all the regulations? For example, if you have a You Pick Blueberry farm and make blueberry muffins to sell, is that allowed?
Yeah, yeah.
Assuming you cook it make them at home.
Assuming that your product meets all the requirements under the Cottage Food Law, yes, you can sell those from, because that's essentially selling it from your residence, right? It's on your property, it's your business.
Right. Okay. And regarding online sales, is there any requirement to notify consumers they are purchasing a cottage food item, or do they find out once they receive the product?
Very good question. It's recommended. I'll say that very blatantly. It's recommended that it's on your website so they know the consumer knows what they're purchasing prior to making that purchase. However, when you ship them the product, that statement is going to have to be on that label, so your consumer will know one way or the other. But best practice would be to let them know ahead of that purchase.
Okay. And I believe we're caught up if you want to continue on.
Fantastic. All right, so we'll play a little game of allowed or not allowed. So now that we've kind of gone through about halfway point, if you will, and answered some questions, I'm hoping we have a general idea of what type of foods are allowed at Cottage and what foods that we're not wanting to see out there. So I'm going to give you the food, and you tell me if you want. Feel free to type it in the chat box if it's allowed at the Cottage setting or not. I think the way this is set up, I'm going to have to do this differently than I anticipated, so we'll work with me here. All right, so first product's going to be homemade granola. Permissible to make in a Cottage food setting or no?
Feel free to type in your answers, people. Looks like we have some yeses. Yep.
So yes, assuming that no other ingredients were added to that, that means that time temperature control, granola is considered an allowed product in a Cottage setting. All right, so I apologize. The PowerPoint I have it placed with the check marks and whatnot. In this setting, it doesn't, so I'm going to navigate this. So before I pop up the next picture, we're going to go to grape, jam, or jelly. If you want to jar your own grape, jam, and or jelly. Allowed or not allowed? So, very good, Susie. Yes, fruit jam and jellies are permitted since they are non-TCS, which is time temperature controlled for safety, due to low water activity. So when you add that sugar during the cooking process, when you make jams and jellies, that free-flowing water activity within it gets removed, and therefore it doesn't support the growth of pathogens. So that's why we consider that shelf stable. Good job. All right. Next up, cake or cupcakes with cream cheese frosting. So that one's going to be no. While the cake itself is considered that non-TCS, the cream cheese has dairy in it, so therefore it is. So that would not be allowed. That frosting, in particular, would not be allowed to be used in a Cottage setting.
Hey, I'm going to interrupt. I'm going to interrupt real quickly, Steve. There was a question about sugar-free or low-sugar jams.
Sugar-free. So if you're using some type of supplement or dietary sugar, generally speaking anyway, when you're going to add that to it and during the cooking process, that water activity along with the sugar or the sugar substitute is what's going to help evaporate out that water content. As opposed to if you're doing the same thing with, let's just say like, I've seen some vegetable jams out there before. Those would not be permissible just because the water activity is a lot harder to get out of it. So yes, to answer the question, you can use the supplements.
Okay, interesting. Okay, great. Thank you.
Another good question. So with the cupcakes, with respect to cupcakes, this is going to be for homemade cream cheese frosting only. If you're going to buy cream cheese frosting that's already shelf stabled from your local retailer or what have you, those you can absolutely use because they've gone through processes to make them shelf stable. So just be sure that when you're using frosting in your cottage food operation, that if it's homemade, you're not using butters or cream cheese. All right, so how about fruit pies? Pies made with fruit, apple pies, blueberry pies. So the answer to that one's going to be yes. So very similar to the jams, right? If we're using fruits during the cooking process, you have that water evaporation, therefore that low water activity, which doesn't support pathogenic growth. All right, and then last up, CBD or hemp baked goods. Baked goods. CBD or hemp baked goods. So the answer to that one is a wholehearted no. So if you remember earlier from the presentation, we had a slide specifically on that. Any foods that are going to be added with hemp, CBD, marijuana, etc., does have to be done in a regulated facility in the state of Florida. Good job. Very nice. All righty.
Steve, I'm going to interrupt one more time before we hop into the changes to the law.
Sure.
We have a couple more questions that have come in that I think are kind of related to what we were discussing. If I have a license for poultry and eggs, am I required to keep my eggs temperature controlled?
I'd have to, you're out of my section on that one, and I apologize. I can definitely get you the answer to that, though. If you remember, follow up with me on that one after the presentation, and I'll get you the answer for it.
Absolutely. And then we're seeing quite a few claims for organic honey offered for sale as cottage food. Is there any requirement that claims such as organic be backed up by certification? Is there certification for organic honey?
Not on a state level. Our agency doesn't have jurisdiction over that label claim. However, there are some federal regulations that they do have to abide by if you are making label claims such as organic, grass-fed, things of that nature.
And is there a permit that allows temperature-controlled cottage foods?
There is not. No, unfortunately, no. So because it's a statutory exemption, the cottage food operations and what they sell, there wouldn't be any permits associated with it. You're either going to be a permitted food facility or not.
Okay. And Katie actually said she does have to keep them controlled. The other half of the question came over separately, so you're off the hook. Eggs do have to be temperature controlled.
Well, I'm happy to, if anybody wants it, we do have some guidance documentation for limited poultry and egg operations, so my info will be here if you want it. Just let me know.
Okay, that would be great. Okay, let's see what's new.
All right. So during the 2021 Florida legislative session, Congress passed Bill 663, also known as the Home Sweet Home Act. So while it wasn't an enormous bill, there were some enormous implications that came out from it. The three that you see here on your screen are the biggest ones out of there. So you have gross annual sales increasing from 50,000 to 250,000. So it means as a cottage food operation, you can make up to that $250,000 in gross sales. So quite a big increase there. As we talked about earlier, cottage food operations are now permitted to engage in internet sales. So that's a big plus, especially in these pandemic times, to be able to sell your product without having to be exposed at farmers markets or where you happen to sell your product. And then another really big one that was really pushed by local communities here where it now restricts local governments from prohibiting or regulating cottage food operations. So all of that is now going to be preemptive to the state. So previously there were some local municipalities that didn't want residential food businesses, so they would restrict those within their municipalities. So House Bill 663, the Home Sweet Home Act, has now enacted those restrictions against those municipalities. So now everything gets preempted to the state, specifically the Department of Agriculture. All right, so a lot of information coming at you fast, so let's just do a quick recap of everything we covered. We went over a brief overview of our Division of Food Safety within the Florida Department of Agriculture, reviewed the definition of a cottage food operation, discussed what products are allowed and restricted, and then also briefly reviewed the 2021 legislative updates. So I think we're a little bit ahead of time, but I'm happy to stay around, stay on, and see if we have any additional questions or curiosities or anything I might be able to help navigate.
Emily, you had a question about local government. Do you want to clarify? So Emily says her town requires anyone with a business based in town limits to have a business tax receipt. Would cottage food operation be exempted from that as well under the new rule?
From business tax receipts?
Yes.
Good question. Not something that my agency regulates, and I apologize to have to punt on that one. There is the Florida Association of Business Tax Officials. They cover all of your tax questions for municipalities. There probably would be your best resource, or your local tax office. That's kind of who they oversee. I would strongly recommend giving them a call and asking them that. But I apologize. The tax component is outside, a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. So I don't want to lead you wrong on that one.
Right. Okay.
So Emily, this is Lisa. So you're asking a business license. There was a separate piece of legislation that passed last year specific to home-based businesses, and I'll have to look at it. I don't think you have to have a business license because they kind of ran parallel, these two bills. But as far as taxation goes, collection of sales tax, that's a different topic. These are prepared foods, and I don't think you're exempt from collecting sales tax in the statute. So that's a couple of that's a differentiation, but we probably ought to look into that and ask those two questions. But I'm pretty sure you don't have to have a business license, and I'll try and pull that other bill from last year about home-based businesses.
Okay.
So
Thank
yeah,
you.
you do have, I know you have to pay sales tax for any prepared foods, Katie. Okay, Emily, yeah, I'll check the other, it's a different piece of legislation, I think, that addresses your issue.
Okay. And then Tony, are value-added honey products, infused honey, creamed honey, honey with nuts, allowed under cottage food, or is this considered processed? Good question.
Well, it's still going to be considered processed, but again, as long as if you add nuts to it, it's not going to make that a hazardous food product. So there's no restrictions against that. I think I heard the word cream.
Creamed.
So cream raises flags in my ears. Again, you're talking a dairy product, something that does require refrigeration to prevent the growth.
Tony, I questioned, is the creamed, is it just how it's processed, or do you actually add cream to it? Because I know you can have like maple syrup creamed, that's just maple syrup. I'm not familiar with honey enough. If Tony can chime in and answer that. Creamed is
There were a couple other questions, Sarah.
well, creamed is the term it actually forced to sugar, so there's no cream in it. There's no milk product in it.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, if you're forcing that product to form more sugar through that process, again, you're not going to increase the water activity into that product, so it'd still be considered a shelf-stable, again, non-TCS, non-hazardous product, so we should be fine.
Okay.
Good question. Very good question.
It's our understanding that we must pay sales tax on all farm sales, including cottage food. That's going to be a tax question, probably.
Yeah, for the sales tax, again, I'll have to defer on that one.
Right. Okay. Okay, we have a lot of local government interference. One of my friends' honey operation was shut down, and we have been through our own major trials at the hands of local government regulation laws. Okay, that's more of a comment. How do we report violations to Cottage law?
So if there's somebody that is out there, they're not abiding by all the regulations, you can email me. Feel free to email me. My email's there on the screen, stephen.carmody@fdacs.gov. You can go on our website at fdacs.gov and can submit a consumer complaint there. Just be as specific as you can when you do submit that complaint. And generally, those are going to come to me anyway when they hit our system, and then we investigate it accordingly.
Okay. Are nutritional labels required? I know you went over the label for cottage food.
So unless somebody is making a declaration, a nutritional panel is not required.
Okay. And it looks like Lisa has shared a link to the bill. Open it up real quickly. That's the home-based business bill that she was discussing earlier. Lisa, did you want to go over it?
Yeah, I mean, I just read the title. I didn't get into the text, but it says prohibiting local governments from taking certain actions relating to the licensure and regulation of home-based businesses, specifying conditions under which a business is considered a home-based business, authorizing home-based businesses to operate in areas zoned for residential use, specifying that home-based businesses are subject to certain business taxes, authorizing the prevailing party in such challenge to recover specified attorney's fees and costs. So that is a link to, that's not the actual bill, it's kind of the synopsis of the bill and everything that happened to the bill in 2021. But for your purposes, you want to go down and you'll want to open the bill text enrolled. So it's at the very top. So you'll want to get, you want to open enrolled and you'll be able to read the bill text yourself. And there will also be a bill analysis. So this is, we're teaching you the secret sauce here if you want to follow legislation. There will be a final bill analysis that was done on 7/6/2021 that it will explain, help you understand the bill better. So that right there, you guys can go in and learn about home-based businesses.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Also, I had a question. Does cottage food law cover someone selling a jam or jellies to a bar to use on food products, or do they need licensing?
All right, sorry, my mute button was giving me problems. I apologize.
Yeah, sorry.
So as long as that facility is not selling that product again, right, then that restaurant or that food operation is going to be your end consumer. So it'll be on that food service operation to be able to determine and justify that, hey, this product is coming from a cottage food operation, but there's no restrictions for that transaction. No, you can absolutely sell your product as long as that's your end consumer. So as long as they're not going to turn around and sell your packaged product again, because now you're wholesaling.
Okay, so they can use your jam in a sandwich, but they can't sell the jam again.
To another consumer, correct.
Okay, great. Make sure I'm not missing anyone else. Are cottage food operations required to register with the FDA as a food facility?
No, they are not.
No. Okay. Steve, there's been a lot of questions asked about your slide presentation. I'm going to share a file that you shared with us, which I think has a lot of information that is in this presentation. It's the cottage food operations brochure.
Yes.
Everyone should see it. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers everything, right?
Yes, so this presentation was basically built off of that brochure. So that brochure is the bread and butter of all things cottage food in the state of Florida. There's a great FAQ section on there. There's an entire page on labeling, definitions, background. It's a really, really good document. So I encourage everybody to take a look at it. Thank you for sharing that. Absolutely.
And I believe you can download it from the presentation here. It's also on the FDACS website. Super helpful. And if you have trouble downloading it or need it, I can send you the link to the website. So just let me know.
Are there any more questions?
Yeah, and Sarah, if you
I'm
Sarah,
sorry.
if you could also add the link in, can you also add the link into the home-based business? When you send an email out, if you could add a link into the home-based business.
Gotcha. Sorry. Yep.
So if we don't have any more questions or comments for Steve, we want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and let you all know that we're going to have another webinar next month with one of Steve's colleagues from the Department of Agriculture regarding the Fresh from Florida program and all its details and how you can become a member. So we hope that you join us then.
Yep. Yeah, if we have any other questions, we will go ahead and, one more. Do beauty products, this is an interesting one. Do beauty products like sugar scrubs and candles have any requirements? Presume they're not cottage food because you're not eating them?
I'm going to hope nobody's eating candles, but yeah, not considered a cottage food, so I can't speak to that. I'll defer to DBPR.
Okay, so that would be, Katie, a DBPR question.
So if I may, I'll just offer, if anybody's getting ready to open a business or you already have one And if you're looking at that brochure and it's not making sense, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're very accessible. We're happy to help. We want to help. If there's a particular product you're wanting to make and you don't see it listed on that brochure, that's okay. That brochure is not all inclusive. Reach out to us, ask us if you can make it. Maybe we'll have some follow-up questions pertaining to the product. But let's have that dialogue, and we're here to help. Please reach out.
Well, Steve, we really appreciate you and everyone from our association that is part of this presentation today. And again, happy Thanksgiving to all.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for having me.